We're back. It's Venomisto coming at you with another Moving the Meter episode. Holy shit, 61. Gonna do some drum programming today. Gonna go into and start doing some skank beats and some other cool stuff. So pretty excited about this. Yes, sir. You know what it is, what it do, what it does. Dance music for the 22nd century. All right, let's get Facebook going. So, got a couple requests around doing some skank beats. So, let's do some skank beats, hey? So, I think I only need one measure here. So, we'll just program a couple different skank beats. It's been a while since I've done any of that, but they're pretty straightforward. They're super fun to play. They're super fun to program. Let's spend a few minutes together and make some skank beats. So for those of you who don't know, a skank beat is a very standard type of metal beat, particularly in thrash metal, but it's also used a lot in death, black, all kinds of extreme metal. And you know, the origination of it, or the origin of it, probably goes back to punk and other stuff with the D beat and a couple variations on it. But you know, I'd say it was mostly popularized by bands, at least how I know it, like Metallica, Slayer, Testament, Anthrax. Megadeth does a twist on skanks, and like some of the stuff that Nick Menza plays, we'll kind of see a difference there. So let's just hop in and take a listen to it. But it's very fast, it's very aggressive. So if that puts you off, you should get the fuck out of here right now. But if you want to hear a very fast and aggressive drum beat that's going to make you want to thrash your head and wake up the next morning with a bangover, well, stay. So very simple. Let me check first off what type of kit we're using here with Superior Drummer. Doesn't really matter, but I want something that's decently punchy. So let me load this UI up. The dry IoT. Yeah, that's nice and tight and dry. That will tight and dry. That will work good. So basically, we're gonna throw a We're going to go ahead and let's go. So a standard way to do it, we'll just start programming them at 200, is basically, in a lot of ways, it's just a backbeat that's been sped way the heck up. So let's loop this and just listen. That's really it. So of course, you know, let's go ahead and program some hats over it. So we're going to put hats on the quarter notes. Let me select them. Add some velocity like we always do to get it sounding more realistic. See, that's too much because then it just sounds like I'm cheating the beat and not playing the full amount of hits that I should. Let's actually just start with a more straightforward velocity. That's your most basic skank beat. Now, if you want to make a D beat, what you do is you take the second kick Yeah, you know what I just realized that screwed me up is that's why I'm like, it's not quarter notes, it's eighth notes. Yeah, so this is all screwy. I had the last stream we did a 7/8 stream, and last stream we did a 7/8 stream, and it was still on that. So let's get our bearings. We're live, so I can't undo this. So this is hugely embarrassing for me. This is like one of the most embarrassing things that's ever happened to me. 1, 2, 3. Why is it? I'm gonna start. Let's start fresh here. So let's come in. I'm going to do Command-Shift-M. We'll go down here, and what we're going to do is put a hit on every eighth note. Because I'm thinking, I'm like, it's not quarter notes. I knew that, but I was looking at this, and it was like 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm like, I'm just going to go with it. but I know that's not the case. Because a backbeat, one of the things that's great about the skank beat is you can come out of it into a backbeat. So let's give this a little bit of... we're just going to go flat across. Okay, cool. So hopefully the people that have joined on stream and heard me say that completely wrong thing are sticking with us. What's going on, Twitch? What's up, YouTube? Right. So hopefully they've stuck with me and they've heard me correct and back out and say that it's actually a kick and a snare on the eighth note beats. And what's cool is that you can come out of it into a backbeat. So it's like... So it works really good in extreme types of music. So now to go to some variations on the skank beat. Now, one that's very popular is the D beat. This is big in punk and hardcore. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the second kick to, instead of playing on the 2, to the 2E. So 2E and 2E and so it's the second 16th note of that little quarter note section. And that's called a D beat. So if we listen to, so it's pretty, gives it a little bit more movement. Nice. Now, the next one, I don't know exactly what people call this one. I've heard it called a gallop beat. I sometimes call it a giddy up beat, but it's basically you add, instead of, it's similar to the D beat in a sense. So on the second kick pattern, you put a double kick on the 2E. So it's basically 1, 2, 1, 2. So let's hear what this sounds like. Pretty powerful, pretty sick. It really gives some nice movement. If I'm programming this out, I might make the second hit slightly lower velocity. If I wanted to make it sound like it's being played on a single drum kit, on a single kick drum. If I'm hitting it, if I'm using double bass, maybe it's slightly less. I usually play this with double bass, and I play it in a weird sense. A lot of people that, when they play this, actual drummers, they play their lead foot, and then when they come to this section right here, they go lead, non-lead. So for whatever reason, in some ways I learned playing lead left in an open hat phrasing, in an open hat position. But so when I play the giddy up beat here, I go lead, then non-lead lead. So it's kind of beside the point here for programming drums, but just for any of you drummers out there, I'm curious to see how you do it or here. So leave a comment if you always stay on your lead, or when you're playing the giddy up part, if you actually go to your non-lead. Cool. So another variation on it, let's go ahead and take these out, would be basically, this beat gets laughs. It's pretty funny. You just add a kick on every eighth note. It's hilarious, too, if we slow this down to like 160. So it's a good way to get laughs from the crowd, or sometimes when I'll be playing live, if you like, you're not supposed to do this or whatever, but if you mix this in every once in a while and just like wink to somebody in the crowd that knows what's going on, or like you'll have like one of your guitarists look back and laugh at you. They're like, what the fuck are you doing? And it's especially funny if you like make a face and like hold one hand in the air and you're just clearly playing it on one foot, because it's kind of lame if you were to do this. It's actually very lame if you were to do that on two pedals. But if you're playing on one pedal, it's pretty hilarious. And I don't know what that's called, but it's funny. So have that in your repertoire for a little goofiness. It's kind of like on a backbeat, like when it's like boom, 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 boom. So instead of just hitting the kick on 1 and 3, if you hit the kick on 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll always get at least one of your guitarists to turn around and laugh at you, laugh with you. So good times. So let's keep going. I'd say the last one that I want to show kind of this first, just kind of the ones that I had in my head. It's kind of been a while since I've even thought about these beats, but this is kind of what I would call the power metal beat, and it's going to be pretty fast at 200, and what we're going to want to do is mess with the accents on the 16th note pattern that's blazing across the double bass. But what this is, it's just your standard, you're adding 16th note singles on double bass on the kick underneath it, and still keeping the stuff on the hat and the snare the same. So you hear a lot of power metal bands do this, or, you know, thrash bands will hit this when they really want to take it up a notch. So sometimes what you can do is let's actually do it right now. So I could do 3 measures of standard skank, and then on the 4th measure hit this. So kind of cool. One that I just realized, one band that I thought that I've heard do this is Pantera in Fucking Hostile. But Vinny does it a little bit differently, but he does do, maybe he goes on, he switches it so that the snare's on the downbeat. But yeah, I mean, you'll hear bands do that. So now if we slow this down to something like 150, I mean, that's the power metal beat, right? So whatever it may be, if we keep slowing it down, that's kind of like getting into like a skanky thrash beat where you could actually like skank to it, do the skank dance. Now, actually, if we stay with this, what I could do is I could take off the kick from when the snare hits. So take it off on the 3s, and then let's hear this. Just hearing that, you can make up all kind of sick riffs in your head if you like this type of music. So, I don't know. What do you think? Should I jump into... I want to show a couple more variations, but I could also jump into ways that we could use velocity to make this sound more realistic. But I think on this quick little stream, let's just keep it to variation, because, I don't know, for those of you that have heard my stuff before, you know we're always trying to make stuff sound more realistic. Before you can do that, I'd say step 1 is just to understand the fundamentals of the beats that you're programming, right? So, you know, don't be making shitty beat. Don't be worrying about making your beats more realistic if your beats are kind of dry toast already. You know, you want to have a nice repertoire of beats that you can go to, and then, you know, start to layer on, okay, I know this trick to make the hat sound more realistic, or I know this trick to add in some ghost notes to make the snare articulation sound more realistic. So that's kind of a little preachiness there, I guess. But so let's go ahead and show this style. So now this is going to be, let's go back up to 200. This is basically the opposite, and this is one that you'll hear. Lars started to play this more later on, or definitely like Nick Menza would do this a lot. So instead of the up skank, I called this the down skank, because all you're doing is you're flipping, instead of playing the kick on the 1 and really getting this like thrashy like up feel, like go rip some shit up by putting the snare on the up 8th notes, you're switching it, you're putting the snare on the downbeat 8th notes, so that the snare is just really counting off quarter notes. And then the kick drum is going on the opposite, so the kick's on the up quarter notes, if you will. So it's like, it's a lot more straight ahead. And, you know, this is kind of if we go ahead and do something like this, if I go ahead and do something like this, this is the class. Oh, what are we doing here? This is the classic Angel of Death beat. Track 1 on Slayer's Rain and Blood. So So he's putting the snare on the downbeat on the quarter notes and then putting 16th note single stroke rolls on the kick drum underneath it. So it's kind of, and it's actually at 200, I believe. So yeah, it's at 200. So this is kind of your standard, can you play double bass? All right, play Angel of Death. It's kind of like your benchmark for it. Single stroke rolls at 200. But this sounds great. Again, it's a little, what's cool about this is that let's just alternate between these styles. So I'm going to go ahead and put the snare here and then. And what Dave Lombardo does well in that track is during the verses, he switches to your kind of standard up skank that we started with. And then during the chorus, he first starts with just the snare on the downbeat, but then he kicks in the double bass and it's like, holy shit. So let's just alternate between these and you can kind of hear how it can be really used to add some nice variation between parts. You know what else? You know who else does this? Lars does it really well on Battery off Metallica's Master of Puppets. Actually, holy shit, both track ones from 1986, third album by the band. So yeah. So one thing that you hear when we're switching back and forth this fast, it sounds a little bit weird. We could do something like this where, kind of like I showed in the beginning, if we are going to do, you can do 3 bars of the up skank and then have your last bar be the kind of Angel of Death beat. So actually, this is like fucking hostile. So if I go ahead and hit this, move this up to the, yeah, this is like, oh, but I think he actually is doing a double, like a giddy up. So. So yeah, this is pretty cool. Again, just different ways to say for parts of the song instead of being like, because some of the feedback that I would give to extreme metal drum programmers is sometimes it can sound a little bit monotonous, or even extreme metal drummers in general. I think some of the best drummers in the genre that did stuff back in the 80s, 90s, and that really stands the test of time now, and even not in extreme stuff like Pantera, Vinnie Paul is just a fucking gem of metal drumming. But look at a guy like Pete Sandoval. His stuff, he switches up a lot, and he does a lot of blast beats, and obviously a ton of blast beats, a lot of skank beats, and just very, very awesome double bass stuff. Never cheats the beat. Always makes sure that he's really hitting his hands along at a blistering speed that keeps up with at least eighth notes, unless it's stylized that way, like just quarter notes on the ride as you rip on double bass. But his stuff, he switches it up well and really works in the context of the song, what's going to work for the song best, and listening to the arrangement, understanding what the guitar parts are doing, what the bass is doing, have a really tight rhythm section, but switching things up, At least that's the type of music that I find myself listening to and pulling out more from the old catalog, like old Morbid Angel. There's definitely a ton of music out there that's less worried about progression and more worried about being, regressive, I would say. So stuff like, but it's funny because I was going to say Dark Throne, but Fenriz is actually a kick-ass drummer. But, a lot of Dark Throne stuff, if not all of it, except for the first album, is like, let's make this sound super shitty and grim and cold and true. And we're going to use like super basic ass beats, and we want it to be repetitive, and we want it to smash you in the face. So there's different ways to go about it. All depends on what genre you're programming for. But yeah, that's kind of just a little take on it there. So let's go ahead and go back to our beginning part now. When you're programming drums, it's all about the song, because unless you're fucking Terry Bozzio at a clinic, you're programming drums for a particular purpose. So begin with the end in mind, know what you're trying to accomplish with the beat that you're about to program. Make sure you have a good fundamental toolbox of Make sure you have a good library of fundamental beats that you can use, and then make sure you have a good toolbox of little tricks to make things sound more interesting and realistic. So there's our kind of standard skank beat. Now, some ones that you'll hear a lot that are pretty popular in metal or other types of music would be one like this. So it's 1, 1, 2, 1, and then you do the 3 E and 4 E. So you go 3 E. Let's listen to it. You can hear. So this pattern, we can even extend it to be like. Pretty standard. So I'm hearing this in my head. What I would do here would be double up the really get the double bass going. So this is something that would be cool. That's sick. I love how Live 10 lets you see this. How you can see multiple clips in one clip view. That's cool. Yeah, multi-clip loop bars and shit. That's dope. Oh wait, there's a mistake there. Cool. So actually, one thing that I wanted to mention that I think can kind of trip people up sometimes is how to handle crashes and part transitions. So this can. Oh wait, what are we doing? So I just want to go back to the standard skank, and then we're gonna switch between a down and an up skank, as I've termed it. But it can get a little weird. Let's flip it. So we're gonna start on the down and then go to the up. So the way that, see, it's like da-da. There'll be 2 hits in a row on the snare, or da-da. 2 hits in a row on the kick. If that's what you're going for, that's cool. Sometimes it can sound good. Other times, in my opinion, unless you're going for this, it sounds weird. So what I might do is, if I'm here, I might, on my last one, make it a... And then this one, can throw in a little roll. Oops. Because I guess my point is that you don't program things that aren't possible, like da-da-da-da-da. It's really hard to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hit the the snare and the hi-hat both at the same time. It's possible. But you have to hit, basically you're playing at 400 BPM for just a moment, right? Or like... So I'm not really explaining myself great, but basically when you're moving between measures, switching between types of skank beats, make sure that what you're doing is sounding the way you want it, and you always have the option of throwing little snare licks or fills there. So one final thing that I want to talk about is how to position your crashes. Let's loop this. So let's throw in a crash. Okay, let's do, whatever. We'll have one every measure here. Some guys wait. They'll be like, to get back on the hi-hat. One of the reasons that I originally played open with my left hand on the hi-hat was so that I could actually hit a crash and the hi-hat at the same time when playing an up skank. But what that makes you do is you go on the snare, you're like, da-da-da. So snare, crash, snare. And I actually prided myself on that because I'm like, I'm not cheating the beat in the least. I'm playing the hi-hat on eighth notes the whole time through and adding a crash and making my snare dead on, and I'm 10 years old. But that's silly, right? So there's not really any point to that. What ends up happening in practice is nobody can hear the fact that you're playing the fucking hi-hat on the one, and your snares end up being sloppier because you're worried about going from the four and to the crash on the one to the snare back on the one and. So who the hell cares? It doesn't matter. Play tight. What you want to do is, number one, have a very rock solid foundation on your snare and your kick, on your kick and your snare, and then have a solid foundation on your kick and snare, number one, and don't cheat the beat on the hi-hat or the ride, number two. It's pretty simple. So one last one that I wanted to talk about in this same vein is kind of the Igor beat. So Igor of Sepultura would wait. He always hits the crash, and then he doesn't even come back to the snare until the two and. So let's actually extend this out a little bit. So I don't know if I'm not going to say that Igor is cheating the beat, but it's just the Sepultura sound. And what's great is that if I hear a Skank beat, I'm like, that's the Igor beat, because he'll do a big fill, or he'll, like, after, 4 bars, he'll hit the crash again, but then he waits. It's kind of the opposite of what I was saying, where I'm like, I used to friggin' hit the snare on every time in the crash. He's hitting the crash, and it takes him so long to come back to the snare. But I don't know if he did it because he wasn't able to pull it off, or if just now he liked the sound of it. But if you listen to those old 80s Sepultura albums, Schizophrenia, Beneath the Remains, fucking Arise, of course, all that stuff, this is all over it. He always does it. It's such a great, just classic, unique thrash sound to the masters of Brazilian thrash, Sepultura. Okay, one thing that's happening that I'm not digging is this hi-hat is too. So I wasn't trying to, like, prove some point that he also is accenting the first and the one and the four and. That's just how it happened when I just added it. So let's hear this. But yeah, it's just such a great classic sound. And this sounds particularly cool on the ride, so let's go consolidate this all together. So yeah, there you go. The Igor beat, the Igor Skank, we'll call it. Sounds pretty cool in my opinion. Nice. So drum programming, fun 7. Nice unique twist that the Brazilian drummer Igor Cavalera added. So cool. I think that's going to about do it today. I apologize for at the beginning giving some misinformation on how a Skank beat works, but it's really you're hitting the kick and the snare alternating on eighth notes and really getting that to crack. Showed some variations, what you can do with the kick drum. Showed some variations with how you position the snare in relation to the downbeat, and some ways to add some cool syncopation with the kick drum. And that was just basically a quick intro to Skank beats. So for all you metal drum programmers out there, hopefully you found it interesting. If it's not your typical genre, hopefully you found it even more interesting. So I had fun. Thanks for the few people that popped on. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit like. You can subscribe to my channel if you want to follow along with more drum programming videos. I just posted up a new tutorial today too on how to make more realistic sounding hi-hats and bring that into your programming workflow with a couple quick tricks. So be sure to check that out. You guys have been great. I've been Venomisto. If you loved it, tell a friend. If you hated it, tell an enemy. Until next time, hasta luego, hasta lago, abiento, das vidania, sayonara, peace.